Hello and welcome to Everyday CX-ISM, the podcast where we take real human experiences and unpack what they tell us about the businesses behind them. The aim? In a world that is becoming ever more digital, we are bringing the focus back on the real human experience, and we consider what we can all learn from these. I'm Katie Stabler, founder of CULTIVATE Customer Experience, a global and award-winning customer experience consultancy. And today I am joined by Xander Freeman.
Hello, Katie.
Hello, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to be here.
You are my first guest on Everyday CX-ISM.
And I'm sure it has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that I live 20 minutes away from you and you and I have done a lot of stuff before.
No, of course not. Of course not. You were just top of the list, Xander. But thank you for joining. No pressure.
No, it's absolutely fine. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. And how is it going over at Call Centre Helper?
Good. Busy, but good. Lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, I hear you're traveling for like the next month.
Yeah, we're trying to do more stuff about growing our global communities. With CCH, we get about 1.6, 1.7 million unique readers per year globally. But sometimes, through no fault of our own, we could be a little bit too UK focused or too, Atlantic focused. And we do get a lot of readership globally. So we're trying to do more work in building communities and actually producing content for different regions.
Amazing. So really broadening that reach. Nothing to do with the fact that you like to travel.
No. You can delete that bit. It's fine, yeah.
Well, thank you again so much for being here. As you know, this podcast is really bringing customer experience right back down to the human impact, remembering who customer experience is for. You, I, all of us as consumers. So what I like to ask my guests, first and foremost, is to share your customer experience story. So I understand you've had a little think and you've got an example that you'd like to bring to the podcast.
Yeah, I do. It's a company I'm not going to name.
Okay.
They are a very...
Do you know it's going to be a bad example then?
Yeah, I know. It's a difficult one because you'll see as we go into the example, I don't blame anyone in it, but it's a very good case study in what can go wrong if you don't set up certain CX processes in the right way.
Okay.
So it's a massive telecoms company in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
That is as descriptive as I'm going to do. It could be any number at that point. Yeah. They did used to sponsor a certain football team in the early 2000s, but that again narrows it down to about 2.
Yeah, and I mean you have to know, right? I don't. Straight over my head. Football.
See, exactly. So basically, I bought a phone with them on a contract because I have to use a certain phone for this job when I do the traveling stuff and get the videos. So basically what ended up happening is they accidentally sent me a refurbished phone rather than a brand new phone.
Okay.
So I called up their customer service team to basically say, look, can you switch it out for an actual new one like I paid for? That was about 30 minutes of me sitting on an IVR through various different things, trying to find the right team to get to. They turns out most of their IVR ended up pushing you out to their outsourced team, which, there's no fault of their own, but they were not set up to actually help me with it. And as much as I spent about an hour and a half on the phone with them, trying to go through different...
So we're up to 2 hours now, right?
Yeah.
2 hours, okay.
I was not in the best mood, but again, because of what I and CCH do for a living, you speak to a lot of end users. So I always try and empathize there. But even that tank is running low after 2 hours. But it basically came down to no one in that team, one, could transfer me to anyone actually worked for the company who could, let's say, onshore to actually help me with my query. Two, because it was quite a specialized thing as well. They didn't really know. They were quite clearly just following a script.
Right.
So it was basically the company not empowering their outsourced agents to actually help their customers, which was a bit of a pain. And again, no one wants to come into work and do a bad job. I don't blame those agents at all. It's more a processes thing that has sort of kicked that one down.
And I think what you've just said, I mean, this is a typical consumer behavior, right? I think most of us like to see the positive, the benefit. We try not to put blame. We try and think, these things happen. Yeah. But ultimately, you're a paying customer. Yeah. You paid for a brand new phone. There's nothing wrong with a refurbished phone, but it's not what you paid for. And then you were through this 2-hour plus process just to try and remediate it. So what actually happened in the end?
So they ended up sending me another refurbished phone.
It's gonna get worse.
Yeah. So then I spent another half hour on IVR and then another 40 minutes with, again, their outsourced team. Basically, it was me with the IVR that time. I was playing around trying to figure out, right, can I get to anyone else that can actually help me? Long story short, I ended up again failing on that one and then realizing, oh, hang on a sec. I know how that IVR will work. Because of what I do for a living, I know there will be a team based in the UK. They'll have a little bit more flexibility in their ability to help me. So I had to figure out what checks on the IVR I had to hit to basically be put through to them. So instead of me trying to convolutedly explain to the IVR, no, you've sent me the wrong phone again, or no, you've sent me a refurbished phone, I basically said, I'm a current customer. I'm thinking about leaving.
That was going.
Yeah, can you help me with this? Because in my experience, customer retention will usually be one, in-house, two, they'll have a bit of flexibility in their ability to actually execute on what customers need. So I ended up getting put through in about 10 minutes to a team based in the UK who I said, look, ultimately, look, I'm not thinking of leaving. This is my situation. Can you please just help me? And they were really nice and they did manage to help me in the end. So basically what happened is I had to cancel that order. I'm still with that company actually through SIM, which says more about me than anything else. But I did manage to get it sorted with them. But again, I think that story, from at least my side, I shouldn't have to do what I do for a living to be able to navigate that system. If even I've had to commit, another 4 hours to that, I don't know what chance someone who is not in this industry or just someone who doesn't have that time to spend.
Yeah, respectfully, if you work in a contact center environment, you do, as you say, you tend to have some insider knowledge as to way things work, as to the processes, and it does give you an advantage. Although, I mean, you still went through a pretty traumatic experience.
We did. I looked at our database and I did see people from their customer service team that have been engaging with CCH, and I did think, right, worst case, I'm just going to bother them directly. But I didn't have to go that route.
And that shouldn't have to happen, right? Should it? Like you say, everyday Joe, everyday customer should not have to go through that experience. So let's dig in a little bit into what happened there. I mean, we have to, disclaimer, neither myself or Xander work for this company. So anything that we talk about now is purely musings from our experience.
Yep.
But what do we think is going on in this company? I mean, first of all, you said empowerment, which I think is something that is so common in organizations when it comes to customer experience.
Yeah.
We are restricted by process and policy, all the technology that we're using, that sometimes even if we know what the right thing is for the customer and we want to help, we are inhibited and we're not empowered to be able to do that.
Well, there's that, and then there's that to the nth degree when you consider the sort of outsourcing component to it as well. Let's start with the empowering component before I go into the outsourcing element of it. It's so difficult as contact center employees, especially again, when we talk about AI these days taking away some of the simpler tasks, you're left with the complicated ones. If you're leaving your agents with the complicated tasks, and yet you still don't empower them to actually make those changes or provide that flexibility to your customers, it is basically doubling down on bad service at a certain point. I don't blame people for going that route. You get put in these situations. There's not enough time in the day to properly figure out a strategy. And a lot of times as well, the people making these decisions were promoted for being good at their jobs, but not provided with the training at that point.
No, totally. So we've got empowerment, training. And again, although this is an experience we're talking about that happened to you, these are challenges that are not isolated to this company. No. Like, how often do we see these? I think that's a great shout. So empowerment, training. What about this IVR? I mean,
I was about to talk about the IVR. It's a lovely combination of self-service wasn't set up to help me there either.
And how long ago was this?
That's a great question. It's about, about a year ago.
Okay, so not actually that long ago. Okay, so we'd expect the technology, the IVR, to be reasonable. We're not talking 10 years ago.
No, we're not even talking about voice IVR either, which again will have a certain amount of flexibility built in if it's done the right way. We're talking a static IVR, and I was pronunciating as well as I can pronunciate. I was doing my best English accent, but it was still difficult.
Yeah. So do you think this is a programming issue, the way it's being set up? It's just too restricted?
I think so. And again, I think it's come down from when you're setting up IVRs, it's so easy to fall in the trap of this is how it will work for me. I'm guilty of it as well in my own life. Like, we're overhauling the CCH website at the moment. I'm very guilty of, right, I've spent months on this now. That works if you have my brain. I'm sure if the person that programmed that IVR was calling into that IVR, they would have no problems at all with it because they know exactly where to go for exactly every bit. When you're not putting the actual end user in the driver's seat and you're not properly testing that, that's where you have those issues.
Yeah, I think that is such a valid point to bring into the conversation, because you're right. You know, we are all so heavily influenced by our own bias in so many ways, you know, whether that's because we've just been working in that particular role for a long time. So, you know, rightly, we've got a lot of experience and knowledge. Whether it's because we do things a certain way, whether it's because the data tells us something and we are seeing the data in a certain way.
Yeah.
We all have these biases that influence how we think things are going to work. What I don't see happen an awful lot in businesses is when these things are being designed, they're not always bringing the customer experience team, the customer experience capacity, like you say, the end user. They're not always bringing them into this conversation, which results in what you experience.
It's also, they're not bringing the agents along with it either, who are the ones that actually have to deal with it. And I get, like, sometimes, you know, it can be difficult to bring people, like everyone along on that journey, but you can use a pilot as well. Some of the best contact centers I've seen are the ones that are actually willing to bring along select groups of people to trial these things internally and take their opinion on board. But that requires so much change management to actually get into the position where you can actually do that properly.
True. But you're right. I mean, outside of the customer, because we know having it straight from the horse's mouth is one of the best things, but we know even that can be biased.
Yeah.
But aside from the customer, the best source of experience data is your frontline agents who feel it, who see it every day, who know what's going on. So yes, why wouldn't you test it with them? Why wouldn't you get them to be part of the design process?
Well, exactly. And then that leads us on to the outsourcing component there as well.
Oh yeah, interesting.
Well, so many of the routes of that IVR just ended up being their outsourced team, which in and of itself is not a problem. It's when you sort of compound that with they have a clean script to read, but no ability to actually enact any change or help anyone unless it is within the very specific definition of those issues. Mine came into it from like it's not a common issue. I don't know. I still don't know how that happened, but
Twice.
It was when I opened that second box and I just saw like the scratched up refurbished phone. I said quite a lot of words that I can't say on this podcast.
Interesting though, because that's the emotion piece, and that's why you remember this experience, right? You know, because there was a level of frustration, annoyance, surprise. Like
it was more, I just didn't want to be on that call for another 2 hours.
So the thought of it, the pain, what was to come. Yeah. But that is so important though, because one of the things I talk a lot about in customer experience is something which a lot of organizations don't actively work on. And it's the customer experience chain. So interaction, first thing, which most organizations work with.
Yep.
But then we've got, after the interaction, you've got emotion. You create some kind of emotion, whether it's deliberately or not. That creates memory, hence why we are talking about this experience. And it ultimately creates perception. So all of these interactions and memories that are compounded is our perception of the brand, is what we call CX. And you had that emotion, you felt that emotion in a number of ways, I'm sure. And that's why it's stuck in your head, for worse, unfortunately. Now, I'm really curious, though, given this experience, you said you are still with them.
Yeah.
So tell me more about why.
If I'm harsh, I'm calling it laziness.
Okay, no, that's fine. This is important to acknowledge.
It's basically, I realized I had a SIM with them anyway that was part of another package that I had, so I could just buy the phone outright, brand new, from another provider, put that in, and it's fine. So that's what I ended up doing there. I did actually have to contact their customer service again recently. I just went through a web chat because I just didn't want to sit on an IVR, and I was able to do it while I was eating dinner.
So you've learnt.
Yeah.
You've learnt to change your behaviour to get the right thing out of that company, which again is not right.
No, but again, it just comes back to, I know enough from what I do for a living to go, right, okay, I don't need to put myself through that as much as I'd love to predict that it's been changed. I knew it hadn't. It had not been long at that point as well. So it's like, right, I'm just going to sort it this way.
You knew a back door and you went through it.
Pretty much, yeah.
But, well, the reason I asked why you're still with them is, and I know you've read my book, Xander, so you'll be familiar with this term, captive customers. Like for many reasons, we get stuck with companies, whether it's because it's our own intention, we're, like you say, too lazy to move on. But it isn't just laziness. It's that you know what the journey ahead of you looks like moving. It's not actually that easy to move from one phone company to another. I've just been through it myself. And that can make us captive. We can be tied into contracts. They might be cheaper. There's all these different reasons why we get stuck with a company, not necessarily because we want to be there, but there's just a multitude of reasons as to why we stay. And companies can become way too comfortable with having their captive customers, but ultimately there's something in the end which will trigger that customer to move.
Yeah, I always think of it like a sort of an elastic property on it. At a certain point, the inconvenience of being with them will outweigh the inconvenience of me actually having to do the research into what I want to move on to.
Nailed it.
And everything else, yeah. So it's a little bit like that in my mind.
Yeah, because all of these emotions compound, all of these experiences compound, and eventually there will be that straw that breaks the camel's back, right?
But you are right, though. Captive customer, like you used in your book, is the right way to phrase it because it just encapsulates. Yeah, you know what? Fair enough. It's a little bit Stockholm syndrome-y at times. But, if I can get through with it, especially if it's not something life or death as well, like a phone contract at the end of the day, it's just a phone.
Yep. Anything to do with phones, Wi-Fi. As soon as something goes wrong, it's just almost the start of my worst nightmare, and I just want someone else to deal with it. But no, I think, that's the realism of that experience, is that sitting behind it, there is process and technology and decisions that are being made that for whatever reason are not resulting in the right customer experience for the end customer. So given this experience, regardless of whether you work in that industry or not, I think you can probably all relate to this kind of experience. So let's share with the audience maybe 3 tips, bits of advice that this experience we can learn from, and maybe look inwardly at our own organizations and think about what we can do differently.
I think for me, if I start with the outsourcing component, it's about giving them. We could talk all day about how best to empower an outsourced team, but ultimately, I think in this case, it comes down to giving them the escalation route if they need it. At a certain point, me being passed over to another team leader within the outsourced team is not going to solve my issue because I already know they can't help me with this. It's out of their control. Giving them that escape hatch, I think, is something that is worth remembering.
Yeah, a quicker escape hatch rather than letting it drag out. Yeah, that's a great point. And I know some amazing BPOs who actually work quite local in Manchester. Well, they're based in South Africa, but they work with companies in Manchester. And I've talked to the teams who they work with, and they actually they fly the Manchester teams out. They sit with the team. They take the football memorabilia to share, and they all get to know each other. They get to know the processes, and they have this wonderfully symbiotic relationship. So what you've shared, it doesn't have to happen, right? There's better ways of doing it. So yeah, I think great tip.
I think it's the trust there as well. Sometimes with BPOs, you can sort of fall into a sort of trap of race to the bottom with costs and other components of it. And I think from a sort of CX perspective, it's about finding the right BPO for your brand as well. If you want to go, like I say, if cost is the most important component, there's no shame in that at all. That's fine. Just set them up to succeed within those boundaries. When you want to do a little bit more of it, it's about actually, like you say, getting your team to communicate that and how you try and communicate your brand internally and making that as seamless as possible, regardless of where you're connected to globally, is always going to be the right way there. It's just about, the time, patience, and actual culture where you can actually do that or are allowed to do that.
Culture, I think, great shout, because this is what all sits underneath, really, culture, isn't it? I think my tip on that, and it's really heavily connected to what you've just been talking about, but it is that feeling like one, because we've just talked about different departments. We've talked about, people in the UK, people who are offshore, retention teams, the team who are meant to fix the problem. That happens, okay? We know that these departments, these different responsibilities exist. I hate to say the word silo because it's such a cliche, but it is. It's very siloed, and we each kind of focus in on our own individual department. And so the customer, that has clearly felt distinctive. You felt like you've gone from one to another to another. And it shouldn't feel like that, should it? It should feel like one company, one organization who can just help you no matter what. So I think one of my biggest tips, regardless of the industry that you work in, is to try and create that cohesion. So again, no matter what number the customer calls or channel they contact you in, you feel like one brand, one support system, one company.
I really like that. And again, I think that's something you can relate to as well. I think anyone can relate to. We're guilty, not you and I, but our industry in general, just in the sense of contact centers or customer service in general touches every other industry on the planet as well.
It does indeed.
You might not have been in that exact situation as them, but you've been on the other side of a phone call before, or a web chat, or self-service, or you take your pick of any channel. You will have been in a similar situation at some point. And it's just, I don't know, I always think customer service gets a bad rep, no matter where. It will always do that. I think we're moving past the sort of general demeanor of, let's say, call centers specifically there and some of the stereotypes that come along with it. Maybe in the UK, maybe globally as well. But I do think, like I said before, no one comes into their job wanting to be terrible.
Gosh, no.
Okay. And it just comes back to, and I suppose this is my final point. I mentioned it earlier. If you're going to be giving your agents, we talk so much about attrition and burnout with agents. Like, look at the demographics of frontline agents as well. A lot of times, like, if you let's take the younger side of demographic there, it might be their first job as well. It's about putting them in the right position and actually training them and having the time with them to actually solve those problems or have that escalation point as well, especially when you're taking away the breather calls or the breather chat.
Yeah, which is just such a massive conversation point at the moment. But you should absolutely support them to get the best out of it and to give the best into it. You actually, I'm going to end on one final tip because you just reminded me as we were talking through that. But you said about agents, frontline, anybody really who goes into work every day. No one goes in thinking, I don't care about the customers. Okay. But at the end of the day, things go wrong.
Yeah.
Like people fail us occasionally. Our technology fails us, maybe more than occasionally. Policies don't work, process don't work. There's always things that go wrong. Heck, COVID. Can we still talk about COVID as a sort of thing?
I still think it was like 2 years ago, but it's a depressing amount of time ago now.
Things go wrong that affect business. It happens all the time, and we can't be naive to that. So when things go wrong, like getting sent a refurbished phone rather than a new one twice and then not having a great experience, one of the most amazing things a company can do is recover that experience well. So also think about what your recovery process is on the back end. Do you have a framework to make sure when something has gone wrong, you don't only just fix it, but you apologize sincerely, where possible or where necessary, you compensate.
They offered me a discounted rate on something else with a code that I then tried to use and then didn't work. And I just thought, you know what, I don't want to go through that IVR again. So I just never followed it up.
No.
So yeah, you've triggered that memory.
Oh no. So they tried, but that didn't quite work.
But again, it's about having the wrong automated systems in place there. The effort is there and the willingness is there. It's just not actually executed properly.
Oh my gosh. And I think you've just perfectly summarized this. Whenever it comes to customer experience, we really do care, especially the people working in CX. They care, they're passionate. It's what happens afterwards. It's not through lack of want or will, it's through lack of other things, shall we say. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. But I really hope as a listener, you have taken value from that. I hope you don't resonate too closely with it, but certainly with regards to your organization, you've got some shared lessons that you perhaps take away from that. Well, thank you so much for sharing and reliving that pain. I hope it wasn't too traumatic.
I'm still here. It's fine. It's just a phone.
It is just we can't live without our phones. I can't believe you're saying it's just a phone, but it is just a phone. So thank you for joining us on Everyday CX-ISM. We'd really love to hear your thoughts on this. If you resonate, if you connect, if you're thinking, what's the big deal? All your comments are absolutely welcome. So please come along and join in the conversation on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Instagram. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, please do like, follow, and subscribe wherever you are listening or watching. It genuinely means the absolute world.